Hi everybody, and welcome to this series on how to learn to code in 2022 for absolute beginners. The reason I'm making this tutorial in 2022 when there's literally hundreds of different tutorials out there is because I'm really scratching my own itch. As a self-taught developer that started doing this about 10 years ago, I had overcome this giant hump that I've heard many other people talk about, where you're just kind of in this gray area. You can't really develop any code of your own because you're not quite good enough. You haven't really mastered the syntax yet, so you spend a lot of time learning about functions and variables. You learn all these new terms, and yet you can't really do anything productive, and it feels like you're in school studying a textbook type thing. And so I wanted to create a mini series that can get you up and running, building projects right away, so it's fun and engaging from the start, because I really believe that this skill set is essential for the future. It's essential at building tomorrow's technology and staying relevant in today's workforce. And really, it's a creative expression. It's sort of one of those areas where science and art kind of mix together and make something really, really beautiful. And really, sky's the limit. It's where you want to take it. There are some people that go into data science and artificial intelligence and really geek out in that stuff, and that's really cool. There's some people who love doing the web development side and building beautiful web apps and mobile, development. So I just hope that you can enjoy this course and have some fun with it. Today we're going to start really small. We're going to build a project, and without further ado, let's go. Okay, so to get started, we are going to be using the Python programming language. There's a few reasons why I want to start with this. Firstly, it is one of the most readable languages out there, in my opinion. I think that, you read Python code, it almost reads like it's what we call pseudocode or not real code, because it's so readable. It almost you can almost read it like a sentence, and it makes sense what it's actually trying to do. So we're going to start with this programming language. In order to download it onto your machine, I'm not going to speak too directly to that, because all of your various systems are going to have different version requirements and things like that. So all I'm going to do is lead you to the right resources, and they have very easy tutorials on how to install the right version for your system. So if you go to python.org/downloads, you will find that the website will most likely serve up the right version for your computer. So just go ahead and hit download once you're there. And then the other thing that you're going to need is what is known as an IDE, which is basically just a program that allows you to edit and run code. And I've got a few along the top here in the various different tabs. I've got Visual Studio, which is the one I will be using for the remainder of this series. It's my personal favorite. It's a program from Microsoft, and it makes code really fun to write and really readable. It has a ton of built-in features I won't get into here, but there's a number of other ones that you can use as well. There's Atom that many people enjoy, and then there's PyCharm, which is I would say really relied upon for professional developers that do make a lot of data science apps. And I should also mention that the Python language, in terms of the sea of languages out there, really shines for its data science and artificial intelligence functionality and libraries, which I won't bore you with that up front. Obviously, this is for absolute beginners, but I'm just trying to give you a little window into what this language can do. So we're going to move on to the next section now. Okay, now I'm going to show you what we're actually going to be building in this video. So the program that we're going to be building is based on this free personality test that I found online. It's based on the 16 personalities model, the Myers-Briggs test, for those of you out there that are into that sort of thing. And really all I want to draw your attention to is the fact that this interface is basically asking the user a question, to which they give their answer and then move on to the next one. And the program is taking in all those answers, saving them, and then performing a calculation on them that gives you your personality at the end. That calculation is performed by a set of steps, and that is typically called an algorithm. So whenever you hear the word algorithm, often I notice, especially in business environments, that's used as a sort of buzzword to mean like magic. When at the end of the day, algorithm and recipe are almost indistinguishable. It's a set of steps where it takes in a reliable input and performs an output. So we're going to be doing that in this course here, or in this video, I should say. And so yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what we're actually going to be building in this video. So we're going to do a very simplified version of a personality quiz, and I'll show you what that looks like. So when I run the quiz, it gives us a little intro message here. Welcome to the personality quiz. Hit enter to continue. It gives us question 1. So you regularly make new friends and you have to pick your solution. So maybe I'll say strongly agree to that, which is 1. And then you enter another answer here. So question 2, how often do you make how much do you agree with the idea that you make a backup plan for backup plan? So maybe I'll agree with that one too. And then you usually stay calm under pressure. So maybe I'll disagree with that one. And then hit enter, and then it says calculating your score. Wait a second, and then we see your personality can be described as extroverted, conscientious, and nervous. So as you can see, what it's done is it's taken the inputs that we provided it, and then it's basically given us a little score on how you can describe us as a person, basically. And you can see that obviously this is very, very simple, but if I were to run this again and enter completely different scores, so let me just show you that. Maybe if I chose strongly disagree for everything, so you strongly disagree, you don't make friends, you don't have a backup plan, so that'll also be a 5. And maybe this time I will stay very calm under pressure. Hit 1, let it calculate the score. You can see that it comes up with a totally different description of us. So your personality can be described as introverted, laid back, and composed. So you can see that it's responding differently to the inputs that we give it, and calculating our personality as an output. So this is what we're going to be building. Next step is to get into the actual code and start coding. Okay, so I've got a fresh VS Code window here with no files, but I've just got this folder open that I created called From Scratch. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to name it quiz.py. Now the .py extension is just an extension that tells your computer that it is a Python program that we are creating. And in this file, this is going to be our first program. This is where we're going to write all the code that's going to characterize our quiz. Just as you saw it just a second ago. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create the opening message that you saw. So welcome to this mini personality quiz. So here I'm just going to type introduction, and I'm going to type equals, and then I'm going to create some quotes. And I'm going to say, in those quotes, I'm going to say welcome to this mini personality quiz. Maybe I'm enthusiastic about it. So that's our introduction message. Now, what did I just do here? I just told the computer, basically take this word that I give you, whatever that word is. Like I could literally call it, I don't know, Smith, and it would accept that. Sorry, it just sometimes grabs those auto completes because it doesn't know what Smith is. But yeah, you can literally give it whatever you want, and this is what's known as assigning a variable. Now I'm not going to bore you, like I said, too much with the terminology here. We're going to get to building, but I just want to show you one of the most important concepts that is common across all programming languages is assigning a variable. And what you're doing in doing this is you're basically saving a value to another value. So by saying introduction equals our little string of text here, we are saying, hey computer, save this string of text to this variable. So all I have to do is say introduction, and you know what I mean by it. So it's a way of sort of compressing, in a sense, this big long string, so I don't have to type it every time, to the word introduction. Next thing that we need is our first question. So I'm going to type in here first underscore question, and again, this can be whatever we want. And I'm going to set it equal to question 1 colon you regularly make new friends. And again, that's just sitting in quotes, and that's really important to remember to put the quotes there, because otherwise the computer won't understand what you're trying to group all these words together. So the next one, we're going to continue and type out all of our questions here. So we'll continue and kind of do second question. Okay, you often make a backup plan for a backup plan. And then we're going to do question 3. So third question, again, these could be whatever you want. I'm just calling them by standard convention. And it is, I will say just one thing quickly on that is depending on the language that you're using and the community that has developed that language, they like different variable names. So obviously, like I said, you can set them to whatever you want. These sort of underscore variable names are somewhat common in the Python world and much less common in languages like, say, JavaScript. Okay, so question 3. You usually stay calm under pressure. Okay, awesome. So we've got our 3 sort of questions here, and I know they're not technically questions, but they are how much do you agree with each of these. Now we want to create our standard set of answers, and what I want you to notice about how I'm about to do this is how we're thinking about building an application. Like how do you think about putting the whole quiz together? Like if you were to just type this in a Word document, you would definitely just obviously write each of the questions, and then you'd have to probably type out the how much do you agree disagree thing. Like imagine that you're doing a paper quiz at like school or something, and the teacher went to Word and typed out 1 to 5 agree or disagree. Chances are when he or she was typing up that document, they probably only typed the standard answers once and then just copied and pasted a bunch of times. That is exactly what we want to do here as well. We don't want to have to type out the standard set of answers over and over again. So instead, we're going to go in here and we're going to, the word we're going to use is programmatically, include that with all of our questions. So we're going to create a variable just like we have above, and that's going to contain all of our standard set of answers. So what I've done here, and you'll notice I've included 6 quotes, which you might think is overkill, but all that allows us to do is to type on multiple lines. And every time I add an extra line, it corresponds to an extra line in the terminal below where we'll run the actual code, and I'll get to that in just a second. So we've got the 6 quotes here to hold a bit of a longer string for our standard answers. So we're gonna say, please choose an answer. And then I'm gonna do this. So I'm doing a \n. Now that's just a little code to tell your computer that you're doing a line break. So what that'll do in our terminal is it'll create 2 new lines underneath it just to make it sort of look a little nicer. And then I'll include 2 more spaces, and I'll just type in 1, strongly agree, and I'll type in a space or 2, and then I'll do 2, agree, 3, neutral, and then I'll just go to another line here, type 4, disagree, and 5, strongly disagree. And so now we have our standard answers. The last thing I want to standardize is just the call to press enter to continue again, so we don't have to type it out every single time we prompt the user for a question. This makes it so that it's a lot faster if we want to add additional questions to this quiz, which maybe we'll want to do. So I'm just going to create this variable enter, and now we've kind of got all the scaffolding to create our first quiz. We've got our introduction, question 1 to 3, our standard answer, and our enter prompt. So now what do we have to do? Well, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to just put hashtag take input. Now this is just coding good practice to label what you're doing. So we could even go up here, and don't mind that. VS Code just brought that in when I made that error earlier. But we can just label this like initial variables. or something like that. And what that does is if anybody else comes in and uses your code, it makes it a lot easier to understand. So it's really helpful to try to comment as much as possible, especially if other people are going to be reading your code, or if you're building a coding portfolio for others to see. It's a lot more readable if you include a lot of coding in code documentation about what's going on. So here we're going to build the next part of the functionality, which is to take the input. Obviously, if we run this program right now, nothing will happen because we've just got these variables and that's it. So actually, I will take this moment to show you what that looks like. So there's VS Code comes with this little play button here. Assuming you set up your development environment correctly, this should work. So you hit play and you can see nothing happened. So the reason nothing has happened is because we haven't asked the computer to do anything other than save strings of text to certain words. So in order to actually make this work, we need to give it instructions to do something. So the first thing we want it to do is to print our introduction. So we're going to say print introduction, and now just going to show you that actually tells it to do something. It's so if I hit play now, you can see it prints the introduction. So it prints the value associated with that variable. Welcome to this mini personality quiz. So we've given it our first instruction, and we're going to continue. Now we're going to say enter. So what we're doing here is basically this. So this print function is built into Python. Basically what you're doing is it will print whatever is between the parentheses. So if I were to just, for example, go below here and print and then put in, welcome to this quiz, I'll put a bunch of exclamation points, it will print what I've gotten there. And I should just also note that in order for it to detect the updates, you have to save the file after you're done typing. So just save the file every time you're about to run it. And so you can see here that it's printing out the introduction, it's printing out the enter prompt, and it's printing out what we just fed it between the quotes here. So the print function is built into Python. It sends text into this terminal below, or whatever terminal is calling the program, and it's an essential term to know, and it's going to be essential for building this quiz. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. So the next thing that we want to do is once we show the user, like this is what we have right now, is we have welcome to this mini personality quiz. Next thing we want to do is actually show the user, make the user interact with the program to get to the first question. So we want them to press enter, which means we have to ask them for their input. Since we are already asking them to press enter to continue, we want them to actually have to do that to get the next question. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to use another built-in function in Python, which is called the input function. And again, we're just going to open and close our parentheses here. And every function in Python, actually, you can tell it's a function because there's an open and closed parenthesis. So that's just essential to remember. Once we get into functions, you'll understand that sort of intuitively. It's just so common. But yeah, that's when you know it's a function. So here it's sort of a magic keyword that calls a bunch of underlying code to do stuff underneath the hood, so that we don't have to type it all out in a very verbose way. So here's the input function, and we're just going to put in some quotes here, this little arrow. Now, we don't have to do this. I just like this sort of aesthetically, because what we get when we hit play is we get that little arrow right before our input. So if I did not include that, if I just get that out of there and hit save, now I just hit play, and sorry, it just errored out because it was still open. Now you can see, there is no arrow there, and it's not necessarily clear that the program's even running. So I personally, just for aesthetic purposes, like to put something. You can put whatever you want in here. I'm just going to put an arrow. So now if I'm going to hit Control Z just to end the program and rerun it. Now we have our arrow, and if I hit enter, now it ends the program because there's no further instructions. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually prompt that first question. I'm just going to use good practices here and say first question. And then here I'm going to print our first question. So you can see that VS Code is actually helping us here by trying to predict where we're going with this. So I'm just going to go ahead and type that in, and then we're going to also do standard answers, and then we're going to go print in some quotes. We're going to say enter answer. Okay, and then so now here's what we have. So just to keep you up to speed with what I just did. So, and I'll actually just clear the terminal so it's not confusing. So what I've got here is, if I hit play, welcome to this mini personality quiz, press enter to continue. So we're gonna hit enter. Now we get our first question, but hold on a second. This is really, really ugly. And now we're asking for an answer and it's not clearly separated. So how do we format this thing to be a little better looking? Well, it really just comes down to using these backslash ends to kind of format our statement. So we're going to go ahead and do that here. So I'm going to go back up into the string, and I'm going to do some backslashes and the ends between each of the questions, and we'll just see what that does to the formatting of the overall look of things. So I'll put in a bunch of these. Just like that. Hit save, and now if I run it, hit enter, you can see it's better. It's still not perfect. And so what's happening here is in our code, we can see that this is moving to the right by 1. So we're just going to backspace that within the string, and that should bring that back in line with the other questions. And then you can see between question 3 and 4, there's this random space. So I'm actually just going to get rid of that N and save. Hit enter. Okay, now that's looking a lot better. I just noticed that I did not include a colon here. So just include that to make that look a little better. And you know what? Maybe I'll get rid of one of these line breaks here so that we only have, we don't have a space between question 1 and the prompt. And maybe I actually want a line break above so it separates from question 1. So now if I save that and run, we press enter, you can see this is starting to look a lot better. The only other thing that maybe I want to do is preface all of our questions with a line break so that there's a clear separation between the steps of the program. So now if I hit enter, you can see there's this nice separation from the last prompt to question 1, and then the separation to the actual input that it calls for. The last thing that we're going to do is here where it's asking for an actual answer, we are going to create one more line space, hit save, run it again. If I hit enter there, now enter answer is separated, and it's looking much better. I will just also format this intro to look a little bit better as well. So I will give it a line break to start as well. And then I think I'll also do that on our entry prompt. So to give it one more run, you can see now we have the space for where it starts. Press enter to continue. We go ahead and do that, and we get a nice clean question 1 there. And since we have standardized the prompt for answers, we don't have to do this ever again. We've done it once, and it's done for all future questions, which is part of the reason why coding as a skill is super scalable, is that often you can reuse components once you built it once correctly the first time. All right, so let's continue and get the rest of our questions in here. So we're going to go comment in second question. We're going to print that second question. Print our standard answer. And we're going to print this, just calling the user to. And actually, this is a great example. I don't actually have to type that over again. I could copy and paste it, but maybe we just create a variable. We call it like short answer or short entry, something like that. And instead of putting this in the parentheses of the print statement, we just put that up there. And now I can just go short entry, and we have a little bit of a nicer to read code as well as easier to type. So we're going to go into and do our third question here. So third question, we'll go print, third question, print, standard answers, and print short entry. And now let's see, I will also call for some input to separate all these questions, because otherwise it will print all at once. Just move that up. And now if I hit play, run the program, gives us that same prompt that we had at the beginning. If I hit enter again, you can see it takes us to question 2 and then question 3. And then I hit enter and ends the program. So the next question is really, how do we get it to take in our scores and do anything with it? So we know how to prompt the user for an input, but how do we save that input and then do stuff with it? Well, this is basically where we combine two concepts that we've already covered, the input concept with the variable concept. So here where I have the first question, I actually want to save the results of this input function. So whatever the user inputs. So how would I do that? Well, we just use this same technique we used at the top. We assign it to a variable. So I'm going to call this answer 1, and I'm going to set it equal to that input. And if I then do this, so I'll just go down here and I'll go print answer 1. Okay. If I save that and run it, and I get through the intro, and now this is question 1. This is where it's going to save our answer. If I say I am cool, and then hit enter through the rest of the questions, you can see it prints I am cool. So it is taking what we gave it and printing it down here because we're telling it to print it. Obviously we don't want it to do that. We want it to calculate our personality, but that's just how we save each answer input. So next we're going to go here and just repeat that for each of the questions. Perfect. Okay. So now we're saving all of our inputs, and the last step is we actually have to do something with them. And this is where it comes back to what I was saying about algorithms. So technically we have to develop our algorithm for how we want to calculate this person's personality based on their answer to these 3 questions. So I'm just going to comment in scoring algorithm. And in here, we have to come up with a way to score it. So this is where we're going to be getting into conditional logic. And that is a super academic sounding term that means something very simple. It basically relates to the title of this channel, which is If Then Not Again. It is basically putting the answers through conditional statements. It's a very simple algorithm. Obviously, there's many more complicated ways to do this, but for this example, we're going to keep it simple. We're going to take the answers of all these questions, and we're going to put them through simple if-then statements to try to come to, basically a trait. So first thing we want to do is process the answer of question 1. So we're going to do an if statement. So to do an if statement, we're going to type if, and then we're going to take the variable that we want to consider. So this is our conditional. So here we can say if answer 1 equals, dog, do this. And then this is the structure. This is the way it works. I just forgot some quotes. So this is the basic structure of an if statement. So here what we're saying is if the user enters the value dog into answer 1, it's going to print do this. If it doesn't, if it does else. So else statement means if literally anything else happens, do that. So a couple things to notice here that usually confuse people is firstly why the double equals. That technically means equals exactly. But basically in an if statement where you're trying to do equal to. Python will not accept. You can see it puts a little squiggly line underneath it. It needs the double equals. Technically, that underneath the hood, that means matching type and value, but we won't get into that in this video. So we need the double equals to make our conditional statement. So we're saying if answer 1 equals exactly dog, do this. But you'll notice that there's this indentation, and that's actually really important in Python. Python requires you to pay attention to the indentation as well as the code itself. So if I move this back here, you can see squiggly lines showed up everywhere. And if I hover over, it's going to give us basically a print error, but here it says expected indented block. So it's saying after this if statement and this colon, we expect to see an indentation. We haven't. So go ahead and do that. So same with the else statement. So you don't have to put an else statement. So an if statement on its own like that is perfectly fine. But if we did want to write our algorithm to consider all other cases, we can use an else statement to say that. So if all other cases don't match, then do something else. So basically the only thing to remember here is that we have our if statement, we have whatever we want to test, then we have whatever we want it to do. And then if that fails, if that condition does not come true, then do something else. So I'll just, what I think I'll do is I'll just show you this in action. So hit enter here. So for question 1, we're gonna say dog. And then we're just gonna click through, and you can see it said do this. Now if I run it one more time and I type into question 1, I type in 1, 2, 3. Click through the other answers, you can see it says do that because this condition failed, so that it ran this code block. So we're going to use this conditional statement to score our quiz, and the way that we're going to do that is just very simple. We're going to say so returning back to how our questions are structured, if somebody has a value of 1 in the answer, that means that they strongly agree, and if it's 5, they strongly disagree. So we're going to say if the answer is less than 3, we are going to create a new variable, and we're going to say trait 1 is equal to you put some quotes, extroversion or extroverted. Else, if it's not greater than that, we're going to say trait 1 equals introverted. Okay, so what's happening here? Why am I able to set the same thing to different values? The reason is because if this condition fails, this doesn't run. So it's able to assign the value differently because this block doesn't run. Only this one runs. Also, I should mention that even if it does run, because Python programs run in order, meaning that line 43 runs after line 42 and that runs after line 41, we technically could just reassign this value. So we could just do something like trait 1 equals introverted. And what Python will do is it'll set trait 1 equals extroverted, then set it equal to introverted. So that is okay, but I just wanted to try to avoid that confusion. All we're saying is if the answer isn't basically an agree, we are going to, or a neutral, we're going to call you an introvert, basically. Okay, so we're going to move on to question 2 then. So the next if statement here, if answer 2 is greater than 3, we'll do the exact same sort of pattern here. We're going to say trait 2 equals conscientious, and else we're going to say trait 2 equals laid back. Okay, we have one more question to process, and I just want to stress again here, notice the indentation blocks. Notice that we're using simple greater than, equal to signs here for our conditional statements. So we're going to say if answer 3 is less than 3, then set trait 3 equal to composed, else trait 3 equal to nervous. Great. Okay, so we've got our scoring algorithm all put together. Now what we need is an actual score to be produced. So we're going to create a score variable, and in here we are going to store the values of our algorithm with what's called an F string. So what an F string allows us to do is it allows us to insert other variables into a string of text. So here I'm going to show you what that looks like. So we're going to print out our final personality score. Your personality can be described as trait 1. And notice I have the squiggly brackets here, and then I put in a variable name, which we defined up here. And what this will do is it'll print whatever that value is. So by simply putting an F outside of the quotes, we are then able to make use of these squiggly brackets to enter in variable names to basically print them out or do something with them. So then we're going to go in here, we're going to say trait 2, so more squiggly brackets, and we're going to say and trait 3. Okay, awesome. So now we have our 3 traits. We just have to print our score. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to go, I'll just do this, calculating your score. I'm going to say print score. And then I will print, I'll do a line break here and I'll say thanks for taking the quiz. Goodbye. And then we're going to use another built-in method or function here. We're going to call it, and we're going to call exit. And just, again, we can tell it's a function by opening and closing the parentheses. The only way that you would know that that's a function is by reading the Python documentation. So I'm kind of saving you the work there, I guess. But, this is just going to close our program after it's done running. So now let's just give it a little test run here. So I'm going to clear the terminal. On MacBooks, you can just type clear, and then I'll clear it up for you. I'll pull this up. So here we can say, welcome to this mini personality quiz. We're going to hit enter. Here's question 1. So we're going to enter 1, then we're going to enter 2, and we're going to enter 3. And what's happening here? We are getting an error that you can see it's a type error. Okay. So this is essential to understand is that just like for anybody who's ever used Excel or any spreadsheet, maybe you've had a few cells that have been formatted as text and not, numbers. And so maybe you try to, you have a 2 in a cell that's technically formatted as text. And for some reason it's breaking a formula because you aren't able to add it to another 2 to make 4. The reason is because Excel is recognizing that 2 as a text, like basically anything like a letter or a space, which you can't perform math on because how do you add, words to each other? So basically you need to format the text into different types. I won't get into all of them here. For the purposes of this program though, if we go back to our if then statements, we can see we are asking the program to check if the number is less than, or the input is less than a certain number. Well, what if the input's not a number? Then how does it check it? And that's what this type error is saying, is that equality symbol doesn't work because by default the input function sends through a string and not an integer. So you can see it's saying string str, and it's not an integer, which it requires to actually do math. So what we're going to do here is we are going to require that the input is a integer, like it's saying. And this is called typecasting. The way that we do that is just we wrap our input in a integer type. So to do that, we just put in int and then we put some parentheses around it, just like that. We're going to do that for all of our answers. Hit save. And now, if I run this, and we put in, maybe we'll just do 1, 2, 3. You can see we don't get that error anymore, and it actually gives us a score. So it works. The last thing that I'm going to do to complete this program is add a little bit of dramatic effect, which you would have seen in my demo. Rather than just spitting out your score, we want a little bit more drama, I guess, to the calculating steps. We're going to put in some periods just to make it really appear like the program is thinking, when of course computers are plenty fast enough to do that calculation very quickly. But we want to do a little pause. And so I'm going to show you how to get the program to pause for 3 seconds while it so-called calculates a score. And to do that, we're going to import a built-in module from Python. And all that is basically a set of code that has pre-built functions and variables and that you can call at any time that have special functionality. So we're going to import the time module, which allows us to kind of play with how quickly the program runs. And to do that, typically the way you do this is you put the import statements right at the top of your file, right at the top of your program, and we're going to say import, and we're going to say time. And you can see it's just sitting up there, and it's sort of grayed out, and all that means is it hasn't been called yet. So if I do something, if I type time here, now you can see it lights up because it's been called in the program. So it's just a way of telling the developer, hey, you imported this thing, but you're not using it. So we're going to use one of the built-in functions within time to pause our program here. So when it says calculating our scores, we're going to say time.sleep, open close parentheses, which again tells us it's a function. And we're going to put the number 3 in there. What the sleep function does is it will pause the program for the amount of seconds that you put into the parentheses. So after it prints calculating the score, it'll wait for 3 seconds, then actually give you your score and print this out. So check this out. I'm going to run this just to show you how this works. Press enter to continue. We're going to disagree with everything just for fun here. And you can see it's pausing, calculating your score, and then it gives you your score and it says thanks for taking the quiz, goodbye. Now there's some minor editing we can do on formatting. Maybe you want to add another line separation here to separate it, and maybe we want to get rid of the space to kind of line that up a little better because there's this sort of awkward space here. But for the most part, you can see from 0 to actually building our program, we have gone from knowing nothing about code to building our own little quiz. So if any of you have been following along and have taken these questions and put them in there, I would love to see what kind of personality quizzes you guys come up with. Maybe you want to do some other quizzes. I had thought about doing a Harry Potter sorting hat quiz, which would appeal to any of the sort of millennials out there. But yeah, this is basically a really quick and dirty intro into Python programming without all the dry syntax, and with actually building something that could very quickly be turned into a real application like the one I showed you at the beginning. So if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. In the next video, we're going to take these concepts a little further. I'm going to introduce you some more advanced concepts so we can start to do some more real world applications really quickly. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.